There are many things that could be said in this moment. We could talk about our plans, our ambitions, our dreams, but I want to challenge you to consider something much more profound, something deeper than your temporary hopes or fleeting desires, something that transcends the limitations of this world. I want to ask you to reflect on the truth that will shape everything you do today. And that truth is this: you cannot do it on your own. You cannot walk this day by yourself. You cannot face the challenges that will arise, the obstacles that will block your path, the temptations that will confront you, the difficulties that will try to wear you down, without something more, something far greater than your own strength. You are weak, you are fragile. Your plans are fragile. The world will press in on you. The devil will try to tear you down, and your own heart will deceive you if you try to walk this day alone. I ask you, do you understand that? Do you understand how helpless you are without the sovereign hand of the one who controls all things? Do you understand that without the one who spoke the universe into existence, you are nothing? Today, you need the Almighty to go before you. You need His presence to lead you, to protect you, to guide you every single step of the way. And this is not just a nice sentiment that we pray when things are going well. This is the cry of a soul that recognizes that the battle is real, that the war is real, that the struggle is real, and you are not equipped to face it on your own. You need Him. You need Him desperately. As you step into this day, know that there are forces greater than yourself at work. The enemy of your soul, who seeks to destroy you, will be lurking at every corner. The world, with its promises of satisfaction, will pull you in every direction, but none of it will be able to sustain you. You'll be drawn by distractions, tempted by lies, led down paths of self-reliance and self-glory. The moment you try to walk without Him before you, you will stumble. The moment you try to do this thing called life in your own strength, you will fall. What you need is this: you need His wisdom to guide you. You need His strength to carry you. You need His word to sustain you. You need His love to heal you. You need His grace to carry you through. You cannot afford to rely on your own understanding, your own abilities, or your own schemes. You need Him to go before you. That is the only way you will make it through today. How easy it is to forget this. How often we try to take the wheel ourselves. We walk into situations thinking we can handle them, trusting in our own wisdom or experiences. And then when things don't go as we hoped, when we are overwhelmed, when we find ourselves exhausted and burned out, we realize we have been relying on the wrong thing. We have been relying on ourselves. Do you know what that feels like, to think you can do it on your own, and then in the moment of crisis be left empty, broken, and full of regret? The moment you realize that the strength you were depending on was always insufficient. The truth is, you were never meant to walk this life alone. You were never meant to rely on your own power or understanding. You were made to depend on the one who is before all things, the one who is above all things, the one who is in control of all things. Consider this: He has gone before you. Before the foundation of the world, He knew this day would come. Before you were born, He knew the struggles you would face. He knew the valleys, the peaks, the temptations, the joys, the sorrows. And He has already prepared a way for you to walk in victory, victory that comes only when you let Him go before you. This is not a passive surrender. It is an active decision to acknowledge that your life is not your own. You are not the captain of this ship, and you are not the one steering it through the storm. No, He is the one who is at the helm, and He will guide you. He will lead you. He will carry you, but you have to be willing to follow. How many times have we tried to lead? How many times have we tried to take control? How many times have we been frustrated by our own inability, our own weakness? How many times have we looked at the day ahead and thought, I've got this, I can handle this, only to find ourselves sinking into despair because we were never meant to handle it alone? This is why we must cry out, we must call upon Him, we must humble ourselves and ask, go before me today, Lord. Go before me in everything I do. Go before me in my work. Go before me in my relationships. Go before me in my decisions. Go before me in my heart and my mind. I am weak. I am frail. I cannot make it without you. You see, it's not just about asking Him to bless what we've already planned. It's not just about asking Him to endorse the way we've already decided to go. No, it's about asking him to lead us, to direct our steps, to walk before us and prepare the way. We live in a world where everything is driven by self-sufficiency. The world tells us to rely on ourselves, to trust our own abilities, to lean on our own understanding. But listen to me, that is a lie. It's a lie that will leave you dry and empty. It's a lie that will lead you to destruction. There is no real victory in this world apart from the one who has already gone before you. There is no real success apart from his guidance. There is no real peace apart from his presence. So I ask you today in your heart and in your mind to humble yourself and acknowledge this truth. Without him, I am nothing. Without him, I am nothing. You need him. You need him to go before you today in every decision you make, in every conversation you have, in every step you take. You need him to go before you. And you must trust that he is able to do it. You must trust that he will prepare the way. You must trust that he knows the end from the beginning. You must trust that he will guide you even when the path seems unclear, even when the road ahead seems daunting, even when the obstacles seem insurmountable. You must trust that he has already gone before you. And when the trials come, and they will come, you must trust that he is right there with you. He is not only the one who goes before you, he is the one who walks with you through every trial, every struggle, every pain. He is the one who will sustain you when you are weak. He is the one who will lift you when you are downcast. He is the one who will carry you when you are exhausted. But remember this, it is not about your own strength. It is not about your own wisdom. It is not about your own resources. It is about his strength. It is about his wisdom. It is about his resources. It is about his glory. You must decrease and he must increase. You must surrender to his will and trust that he knows what is best for you. And when the day is over, when the challenges have been faced, when the obstacles have been overcome, when the victories have been won, remember this. It was not you. It was not your strength. It was not your ability. It was not your wisdom. It was him going before you, leading you, guiding you, protecting you, sustaining you. So today, before you step into anything, before you make any plans, before you take any steps, before you say anything, ask him to go before you. And ask him to lead you, ask him to guide you, ask him to protect you, ask him to give you the strength you need to face whatever lies ahead. Do not walk this day without him. Do not face the trials of this day without him. Do not go into the battles of this day without him. Cry out to him, go before me today, Lord, and make my path straight. Lead me, guide me, sustain me, and help me to trust you in every moment. And know this, he will go before you, he will lead you, he will guide you, he will protect you, he will be with you, and you will not walk this day alone. The speech emphasizes the need to acknowledge our weakness and inability to face life's challenges without God. We must humbly recognize that we need his guidance, strength, and wisdom every step of the way. The message urges us to actively surrender to God's will, trusting that he knows what is best for us. Instead of relying on our own understanding or strength, we are called to depend on his sovereignty and trust in his plan. The speech highlights the importance of asking God to go before us in all situations, from daily decisions to difficult trials. His presence, guidance, and protection are vital in overcoming obstacles, and we are encouraged to invite him to lead us through every part of our day. There is a truth that we often overlook or underestimate in our lives, and that truth is our utter dependence on God. We can easily become self-reliant, thinking that we are capable of handling the trials and challenges of life on our own. But the reality is much different. The truth is that we are entirely dependent on God for every breath we take, every step we make, and every decision we make throughout our day. There is no aspect of our lives that does not rely on his sovereignty. We often deceive ourselves into thinking we can handle things by our own strength, but it is in those very moments that we are most vulnerable. To recognize and embrace our dependence on God is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of strength, of humility, and of wisdom. When we talk about dependence on God, we are not speaking of a passive or helpless reliance. We are speaking of an active recognition that without His intervention, without His presence, we are nothing. The Bible makes it clear that without Him, we can do nothing. Every achievement, every success, every joy is a gift from Him, not a product of our own ability or wisdom. Our daily lives, our work, our relationships, our very survival are all sustained by the power and grace of God. If we fail to recognize this, we are setting ourselves up for failure. You see, it is not just about relying on God when things are difficult or when we face trials. It is about recognizing our need for Him in every moment, in every situation, whether it is in the midst of crisis or in the mundane moments of life. God does not just want us to depend on Him when we are desperate. He wants us to depend on Him in the everyday moments, when things seem fine and when we feel like we can manage on our own. That is the subtle danger, believing that we only need God in times of crisis. But the truth is, we need Him constantly in every situation. Think about it. How often do we fall into the trap of thinking that we can handle something without God's help? We might have faced similar challenges in the past and think that because of our experience, we can now handle them on our own. Or perhaps we look at someone else who seems to have it all together and we think, if they can do it, so can I. But this thinking is flawed. The reality is that every step of our life, no matter how familiar or comfortable it seems, is a moment where we need to rely on God. We must recognize that it is only by His grace that we are able to do anything, and it is only by His strength that we can endure. The concept of dependence on God goes against the grain of our culture. Our world tells us to be self-sufficient, to rely on ourselves, to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. We are told that dependence is a weakness, that we should be independent, strong, and capable. But the gospel tells us a different story. The gospel tells us that true strength comes from recognizing our weakness and our need for God. It is in our dependence on Him that we find real strength, because it is His strength, not our own. And this is a lesson that is difficult for us to learn because it challenges the very nature of our pride and self-reliance. Think about the example of the Apostle Paul. In 1 Corinthians 12:9-10, Paul speaks of a thorn in the flesh that he pleaded with God to remove. But God's response was not to take away the thorn. Instead, He told Paul, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." Paul's response was profound. "Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Paul understood that it was in his weakness, in his dependence on God, that he would experience the fullness of God's strength. He learned to embrace his limitations, knowing that God's power was far greater than any strength he could muster on his own. This is a powerful reminder for us. How often do we try to hide our weaknesses, to pretend that we have everything under control? How often do we try to present an image of strength when, in reality, we are struggling? We need to learn to embrace our dependence on God, to acknowledge that we are weak and that it is only through His power that we can accomplish anything of lasting value. It is in recognizing our limitations that we make room for His greatness to be displayed. Our dependence on God also means that we recognize His sovereignty over our lives. God is not just a helper in our times of need. He is the creator of all things, and He holds all things in His hands. We are not just dependent on Him in a moment of crisis, but we are dependent on Him for everything: our lives, our purpose, our identity, our future. The decisions we make, the direction we take, the plans we pursue, all must be submitted to His will. This is where true dependence begins, in surrendering our plans, our desires, and our lives to His sovereign control. There is a certain humility that comes with recognizing our dependence on God. We must admit that we cannot control our circumstances, that we do not have the answers to every problem, that we do not have the strength to face every trial. This humility is essential because it is the first step toward truly depending on God. If we think we can handle things on our own, we are not in a position to receive God's help. But when we humble ourselves and acknowledge our need for Him, we open ourselves up to His power and grace. Dependence on God also means trusting in His timing. So often we want things to happen according to our own schedule. We want answers now. We want solutions quickly. But God's timing is perfect, and His ways are higher than our ways. Dependence on Him means trusting that He knows what is best, even when it doesn't make sense to us. It means waiting patiently for His guidance, trusting that He will lead us in the right direction at the right time. This is not easy, but it is necessary for our growth. When we truly depend on God, we find peace, we find rest. The burdens of life become lighter because we are no longer trying to carry them on our own. Jesus invites us to come to Him and lay our burdens down at His feet. He says, "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11:28. This is the rest that comes from knowing that we are not alone, that we do not have to face life's challenges in our own strength. It is the rest that comes from trusting in His provision, His timing, and His sovereignty over all things. One of the greatest examples of dependence on God is seen in the life of Jesus Himself. Though He was fully God, He humbled Himself and became fully man, and in His humanity, He relied on His Father for everything. Jesus spent time in prayer, seeking His Father's will, trusting in His provision and depending on His strength. Even in the Garden of Gethsemane, when He faced the greatest trial of His life, He prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." Jesus showed us that true strength comes from depending on God, even in the most difficult of circumstances. We must also recognize that dependence on God is not just an individual matter. As members of the body of Christ, we are called to depend on one another as well. The Christian life is not meant to be lived in isolation. We need each other. We need the support, encouragement, and accountability that comes from being part of a community of believers. We depend on the church, on fellow Christians, to help us grow, to pray for us, and to walk alongside us in our journey of faith. Ultimately, our dependence on God is an expression of trust. It is about trusting that He is good and that He loves us and that He will always do what is best for us. It is about trusting that He will never leave us or forsake us, that He will always provide for our needs, and that He will always lead us in the way that is best. When we truly depend on God, we are able to experience the fullness of His grace, the depth of His love, and the power of His presence in our lives. It is in our dependence on Him that we find our true strength, our true peace, and our true purpose. And it is through this dependence that we are able to live the life that God has called us to live, a life that brings glory to His name and reflects His goodness to the world around us. Active surrender and trust are central to living a life that is fully aligned with God's will. It is not a passive resignation to circumstances, but an active, deliberate decision to yield our hearts, our plans, our desires, and our actions to Him. It is the choice to place our confidence in God's sovereignty and goodness, even when we cannot see the outcome or understand His ways. This surrender and trust are not one-time acts, but daily commitments, a constant and ongoing process of aligning our will with His. Surrender begins in the heart, in the quiet spaces where we are alone with God, and it is where we must first recognize our need for Him. It is a recognition that as human beings we are limited, frail, and incapable of controlling every aspect of our lives. We have ambitions, plans, and dreams, but when we surrender them to God, we admit that His plan is superior to our own. This active surrender is not something we do reluctantly or out of fear, but rather it is a voluntary submission to the Creator of the universe, knowing that His will is perfect and His love for us is steadfast. Trust, on the other hand, is the foundation of that surrender. Trust is more than believing in God's existence. It is believing that He is good, that He is faithful, and that He is in control. Trust is the confidence that even when life doesn't make sense, when the road ahead is unclear, when the circumstances are difficult, we can rely on Him completely. Trust is the assurance that no matter what happens, God is sovereign and He works all things together for the good of those who love Him. Romans 8:28. When we speak of surrender and trust, we must understand that these two are inextricably linked. Surrender without trust leads to anxious resignation. We give up control, but we do so with fear and doubt. Trust without surrender leads to a false belief that we can trust God in theory but continue to cling to control and practice. True active surrender and trust involve both. We surrender our lives into God's hands and trust that He will lead us in the right direction. We let go of our grip on the future and allow Him to take us where He wills, knowing that His path for us is better than anything we could have planned for ourselves. To surrender actively is to let go of the need to control every detail of our lives. In a world that values self-sufficiency and independence, this act of surrender is countercultural. We are told that we must be in control, that we must make our own way, that we must fight for what we want. But surrender says, I will stop striving to control outcomes, and I will trust that God is in control. It does not mean that we become passive or inactive. Rather, it means we actively choose to rely on God for the outcome, not our own efforts. We continue to work, to plan, to strive, but we do so in the knowledge that our efforts are ultimately dependent on His grace. The story of Abraham offers a powerful example of surrender and trust. In Genesis 22, God commands Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac, the child of promise. Abraham had waited for decades for Isaac's birth, and now God was asking him to give up everything he held dear. The act of surrender Abraham demonstrated in this moment is unimaginable to many of us. But his trust in God was profound. He believed that God was good and that God would provide. In the end, God did not require the death of Isaac, but provided a ram as a substitute. Abraham's willingness to surrender everything to God was rewarded with a deeper understanding of God's faithfulness and provision. This story is not just about the sacrifice of a son, but about Abraham's active surrender to God's will and his trust in God's goodness, even when the path seemed impossible. Active surrender involves acknowledging that God's timing is better than our own. We often want things done on our schedule, and we can become frustrated when things do not happen according to our plans. But trust means that we accept that God's timing is perfect. It means that we are willing to wait for Him even when waiting is hard. It means that when doors are closed, we trust that God has a better plan. Active surrender requires a willingness to trust God when His timing does not align with ours, believing that He is working behind the scenes, preparing us for what is to come. There is a level of freedom that comes with surrender. It is a freedom from worry, from fear, from the pressure to perform. When we surrender to God, we let go of the anxiety that often accompanies trying to control our circumstances. We are no longer burdened by the weight of needing to get everything right or make the perfect decisions. Surrender is a release from that burden, knowing that God is in control. It is the freedom that comes from trusting that even when we fall short, God is gracious and will guide us, correct us, and lead us forward. Surrender and trust also mean releasing our desires for the outcome we envision. So often we surrender to God with an underlying expectation that He will fulfill our desires as we hope. But true surrender says, not my will, but yours be done. It means being willing to trust God even if the outcome does not align with our personal desires. It is in this act of surrender that we come to understand that God's plan is infinitely greater than anything we could have imagined for ourselves. We begin to see that in His wisdom, He allows us to walk paths that refine us, stretch us, and grow us, even when those paths are difficult. This active surrender is a daily choice. It is not something that happens once and is then forgotten. Every day we wake up, we must make the decision to surrender again, to lay our plans, our desires, our anxieties at God's feet. We must actively choose to trust that He will take care of everything. Each day brings its own challenges, and each day we are called to surrender those challenges to God, trusting that He will give us the grace, wisdom, and strength we need to face them. To trust in God's sovereignty is to acknowledge that His ways are higher than ours. There are times when we don't understand why things happen the way they do. We may ask questions like, why did this happen to me? Or why is this so difficult? But trust means that we believe, even when we do not understand, that God's purposes are greater than our own understanding. It means that we trust that he sees the bigger picture, and we trust that he will make all things work together for good, even when we cannot see the good in our current circumstances. Surrender and trust also mean being willing to face the unknown. We are creatures of habit, and we often find comfort in the familiar. But God calls us to step out in faith, to surrender our plans for the unknown future, and trust that he will guide us every step of the way. This is where true trust is tested, when we are called to move into unfamiliar territory, to face uncertainty with nothing but the assurance that God is with us. Trusting in God means stepping out into the unknown with faith, knowing that he will not leave us or forsake us no matter what comes our way. Active surrender and trust are also demonstrated in our relationships with others. We are called to love others sacrificially, to lay down our own desires for the sake of others. This means surrendering our pride, our self-interest, and our need to control others. We trust that God will work in the lives of those around us, even when we cannot see the changes we desire. We surrender our relationships to God, trusting that he will work in them according to his will. Ultimately, active surrender and trust are acts of worship. When we surrender to God, we are acknowledging his lordship over our lives. We are saying, I trust you, I believe you, and I submit to your will. For worship is not just about singing songs or attending church. It is about living a life that reflects our trust in God. When we choose to surrender our desires, our plans, and our actions to him, we are offering our lives as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to him. Living a life of active surrender and trust does not mean that we will never face difficulties or experience pain. In fact, it is often in the midst of the most difficult circumstances that our trust in God is tested the most. But it is in those moments that we have the opportunity to deepen our relationship with him, to experience his faithfulness in new ways, and to witness his power in the midst of our weakness. Surrender and trust are not about avoiding difficulties, but about trusting God to carry us through them. Surrender is not a one-time event, but a lifelong process of submitting to God's will. It is a continual choice to trust him, to let go of our own desires, and to believe that his plan is greater than anything we could imagine. As we grow in our relationship with God, our surrender and trust become more natural, and we begin to see the fruit of a life that is fully yielded to him. There is a profound truth that should shape every moment of our lives. God's sovereign presence is with us in every moment, in every circumstance, and in every experience. This reality is not only foundational to the Christian faith, but it also speaks directly to how we view life, how we face challenges, how we deal with hardship, and how we rejoice in blessings. To understand that God's sovereign presence permeates every second of our lives is to understand the true nature of our relationship with him and the vastness of his control over everything in our existence. We often think of God in a distant, detached way. We may believe in his existence, acknowledge his power, and know that he is sovereign over all, but we tend to live our lives as if he is only present during certain significant moments. We may feel his presence during worship, in times of crisis, or when we are asking for his help. But the deeper truth that we must internalize is that God is always present in every circumstance, in every breath we take. The sovereignty of God is not limited to our high moments of spiritual awareness. It stretches into the most mundane, ordinary, and even painful moments of our lives. To fully appreciate the significance of God's sovereign presence, we must first understand what it means for God to be sovereign. Sovereignty in its purest sense means that God is the supreme ruler over all things. He reigns over every atom, every event, and every decision. There is no part of the universe, no moment in time, and no person who operates outside of his will and authority. His sovereignty means that he is in complete control of everything that happens in the world, from the greatest movements of nations to the smallest details of our lives. God is not a passive observer of creation. He is actively involved, guiding, directing, and working everything according to his perfect plan. This divine sovereignty does not negate the reality of human free will or the painful existence of evil in the world, but it ensures that no matter what happens, God is never caught off guard. Nothing escapes his gaze, and nothing is beyond his power to use for his glory and our good. When we understand that God's sovereign presence is in every moment, it transforms how we approach our lives. We begin to see every detail, whether joyful or sorrowful, as an opportunity for God's presence to manifest in profound ways. In every moment, God is present and active, even when we do not recognize him. His presence is not limited to the times when we are aware of it. It is not confined to the moments of spiritual highs or crisis points. Rather, God's presence is pervasive and constant, active in the good, the bad, and the ordinary. This is the radical nature of God's sovereignty. He is not just a God of the mountaintop experiences, but also a God who is with us in the valleys of life, in the mundane tasks of daily living, and in the quiet moments when we are unaware of his work. Consider the example of the Apostle Paul. Throughout his letters, Paul writes about the sovereignty and presence of God, recognizing that nothing can separate believers from God's love and his presence. In Romans 8:30, 38 through 39, Paul writes, "For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord." Here Paul emphasizes the certainty of God's sovereign presence in all circumstances. Nothing can separate us from God's love because his presence is unshakable. His sovereignty extends beyond the physical realms and reaches into the deepest parts of our souls, our minds, and our circumstances. This means that even when we feel alone, abandoned, or uncertain, God's presence is never absent. He is there, working in ways we may not fully understand, but always at work for his purposes. God's sovereign presence is particularly evident when we face trials and suffering. There are times in life when we feel overwhelmed by pain, grief, or uncertainty. We may wonder where God is in the midst of our suffering, but it is precisely in these moments that God's sovereign presence becomes most powerful. He does not stand aloof from our pain. Instead, he enters into it with us. He is present in the darkest times of our lives, bringing his comfort, his strength, and his peace. His sovereignty ensures that nothing is wasted in our suffering. He uses even the most painful circumstances for his glory and our growth. It is often in times of hardship that we experience the depth of God's presence in ways that we might miss during times of ease. When we face trials, our reliance on God deepens, and his sovereignty becomes more tangible. It is in our brokenness that we are reminded that we cannot rely on our own strength. We are forced to lean on God's sovereignty, trusting that he is in control even when the world seems out of control. God's presence in these times is not a promise that we will be free from pain, but rather it is the assurance that we will never face pain alone. In the midst of suffering, he draws near, offering his comfort and his presence in ways that transcend understanding. God's sovereign presence also shapes how we view the everyday moments of life. Too often we compartmentalize our lives into sacred and secular categories. We think that God's presence is only truly experienced during church services, prayer times, or moments of spiritual reflection. But the truth is that God's presence is just as real when we are washing dishes, going to work, raising children, or facing everyday challenges. His sovereignty extends over all of these moments, and his presence is no less real in the mundane than it is in the extraordinary. This means that every moment of our lives is an opportunity for us to encounter God's presence. We do not need to be in a spiritual place to experience him. He is present with us in our ordinary day-to-day lives. In every task, every decision, every relationship, we have the chance to recognize and respond to God's presence. This changes the way we approach our daily lives. We no longer live as though God is only present in certain spaces or during certain time. We live with the awareness that He is with us in all things at all times, guiding us, shaping us, and working through us. To live with the awareness